Hi, today I'm going to be teaching you how to fix a dent in the truck. The dent is right here. It's a pretty big dent. I already pulled out most of it, but the first steps that you need to do is sand it, get rid of the rust. But the materials you're going to need are some body filler, sandpaper. This here is 320 grit, and then this is 230 grit. And then you also need a block. And what that does is you use that over the body filler when you're done, and it makes it a smooth surface. And then you need a putty knife, hardener for the body filler, and then you need your paint. This here's the paint that matches the truck. Now, if I was doing this in a professional vehicle or somebody else's vehicle, I would be using actual paint instead of spray paint. But you need primer, and then clear coat to go over the red, and then a sander. Now you can do this all by hand, but I have all the tools to do this, so I'm gonna do the fast way and use air power to do it. First step, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your sander and use the higher grit sandpaper, which in my case is 220 here. And I'm gonna rip that off and stick it to this, which is called a DA sander. And you connect it to the air, and then you sand away this rust here and all the loose paint and get it so that way the body filler will stick to it. Okay, after you have it sanded, you gotta use a rag and wipe it down. You can use glass cleaner to help get all the dust and dirt and grease off that might be on there for the paint to stick and body filler. Get it all wet, and then wipe it all down really good. You want to get all the dust off, otherwise the body filler and paint won't stick to it. Okay, then the second step is to get your body filler out and use the spreader. Mix it up a little bit inside of here. For this dent, we're going to need a decent amount, and you might have to go back and put on a second coat of this to get it smoother after you sand it down the first time. Okay, after you have that on there, you open up your hardener and you put about this much. I kind of just eye it. I put a line across it like that, and that's usually good enough for it. And then you mix it up like this
until it's all one color, which the color should be green. And now it's all one
even color. You can take it over to the vehicle and spread on a decent amount to begin with, and fill in the biggest part of the dent first. Now if you look at that, it's a fairly smooth, and you can't see most of that dent. You can see a little bit of a divot there still, so I'm gonna take off this and put it on the edge of my spreader here. Try and fill in that one spot a little bit more. And there's a little bit smoother. And after you're done with that, try to clean off this knife or this spreader as much as you can. I made a little bit of a mess trying to do it, and then take off as much as you can off here so that way you can reuse this. And all this is just an old tile I used and I cut up. You can use anything really to mix it on. Then just let it dry, and then once it dries on here, it'll crack off and break. Make sure you put your lid back on the body filler so it doesn't dry out. And then we'll let that dry for about 20-30 minutes, and then we can come back and sand it. Okay, so now that the Bondo is dried, or body filler, you can come over here and sand it. I have this tool right here, it's called an air file. And basically it does the same thing as that block does. But again, if you don't have these tools, this is a pretty expensive tool to have. Then you just can do it by hand. But what it does is it does the same thing. It just sands down on it. I already started sanding on it because it's a long process to get it sanded down. This is what it does. Down, I'm going to use the DA on it for the rest of the way to get most of it flat. And this can take a little bit to get it down. Okay, so most of it's sanded down now. I'm not going to get this fender perfect because it's going to be replaced eventually. I'm just using this as an example. But like there's still a little bit of a dent here where it's not completely straight and all through here. But I was trying to get that main piece out of there. But you want to get it smooth or sand down to where like you can see metal all the way around it, because that means it's flat with the rest of the metal. But after you sand down most of it with your high grit sandpaper, the higher the number, the more coarse it is. So I'm going to go ahead and change it to a lower grit to get it smoother. So then you want to go back with your glass cleaner and wipe it all down. Wipe it down a little bit before you use the glass cleaner so that way it doesn't clump up. So I'm going to use this here as an example. This is just a bigger putty spreader. And what I'm going to do is put this over here, and it's going to show if it's flat surface or not. You just want to check that. Now it's not completely flat because like I said, this fender is going to be replaced, so I'm not going to try on it too hard. But for the most part, that big dent's out of there. And if you can see, there's a few little tiny pinholes in this. So what you're going to do is use something called glazing putty. Now that you have the glazing putty, you just put a little bit on here. You don't want to use too much because it dries pretty quick. And then just go over it and push on it real hard, and it'll fill in all the little cracks and air bubbles that are in this. And like if you go over the scratches on the metal, it'll fill all those in. And you just go back over it with the DA sander and sand it down. But if you don't do this, you might not get as smooth of a finish. Okay, so first step is the primer, and you want to use a filler primer. And what that does is it fills in all the imperfections, but since this isn't going to be perfect, I'm going to skip that step and go straight to the sealer. What the sealer does is it seals off the body filler, because there's paint can soak into that a little bit and it won't look right. So what you do is shake it up for about a minute. So what you want to do is you want to spray one full pattern across, go halfway across the span of the paint, and do it again. And then let that paint dry for about 15 minutes. Primer dries pretty quick, but as you can see, it's a lot smoother than what it was. That big dent was in there. Okay, now that the primer's dry, you're going to take your color, which is the base coat, and then you're going to lightly spray it on there. And you're going to go ahead and let that dry for 10 minutes, maybe a little bit less than that, and then you can go ahead and go on with another coat of it. Okay, so the next step is to clear coat. Now that the red paint has dried, you don't want to touch it too much because you'll get dust on it and then the clear coat won't stick. But you're going to go ahead and spray it just like you did the other paint. And what the clear coat does is the base paint has no shine to it, and the clear coat is supposed to make it shiny. And if you didn't use the clear coat, the base coat isn't strong and doesn't have a hardener in it, and the clear coat does, so it makes it harder of a paint and more durable. Now we'll just wait for this to dry for a couple minutes and then put on another coat of it. And then once it's done drying, you can peel the tape off and give it 24 hours. You can wet sand it with 2000 grit sandpaper, and then buff it, and then wax it and polish, and then it should blend with the rest of the paint.